Hey, we're live here at NAB 2023 in Las Vegas, and I'm Eric Carson. I'm here with Gray Ainsworth of Lionsgate. Gray, thank you for taking time to sit with us today.
My pleasure. Happy to do it. Yeah.
I mean, we're really here talking about how Lionsgate's going through some transformation in your digital media supply chain.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things that I definitely want to touch on is you guys went through some very long-term planning before you went into a transformative step.
Yeah, we did.
So, and I do want to touch on that, but maybe we can start, just for the audience here, give them a background on who Ateliere is and why we exist in the space. Ateliere is a company really focused on distribution and the media supply chain. Very uniquely, we take care of a couple of things that work well in this space, including the ability to have no-code environments to set up packaging, distribution, media collection, and delivery instructions, as well as a very unique way to deduplicate video frame by frame within versions of a title. And that kind of speaks to the fact that the platform is built around versions in a title, and having that ability to address a single title with known versions is a big part of what we do. So, great. Let's kind of get into Lionsgate and how your project got started.
Yeah.
How did you come to Lionsgate?
Well, so I spent the first part of my career with another studio for 17 years, struggling with a lot of problems, right? How to manage the sales expectations, how to navigate a complex inventory that seemed to never really reflect clarity in how to access content and assets and turn them into deliverables that's needed as well. And that was difficult. I then switched over to the service provider side where I hoped maybe I could start to work on some of those problems. And so I was with probably the largest service provider in the post-production and after post-production space in the world for another 14 years. And then I came back on the content side and found none of the problems had been addressed. And they all still exist. So I came to Lionsgate in about 2 years ago, and I set up with a series of interviews with all the stakeholders, the people on the ground really, who are doing the work, who are involved in the distribution supply chain, from sales to delivery. And there were some common themes and patterns that I found through those discussions, and what it really pointed us to is we needed to radically change our distribution supply chain and how that worked. We needed to take better control. We needed to have ultimate flexibility, and that would allow us to provide much greater sales enablement to the monetization engines of the company.
Oh, it's a great point to talk about sales enablement. I think many people think of a supply chain really just being the how do I distribute media, but the start of that always is I've sold something, I've opened a licensing window.
Yeah.
When we talk about what success mean in that, are there specific metrics that you and the team on the ground started talking about? How do we know we've done this right?
Yeah. So certainly we look at success as several things. Number one is feedback from our internal customers, which is mostly the sales team. So they're out making deals, and we have to deliver on those deals. And sometimes they include us, sometimes they consider our feedback and advice,
Sure.
Sometimes they don't. And that's not something that we've decided is really controllable. So we needed to build in the most flexibility on our side. So the ability to deliver on any sales that comes through 100% of the time, we need to be able to do. Low rejections for the customers, so the people we're ultimately delivering to are happy to receive content from Lionsgate, and we're able to deliver more and more content with the same footprint of people. What we don't want to do is continually throw bodies at problems. And so if our library is difficult, if we acquire more libraries that are maybe less than organized, if our sales activity is leveling up, we want to be able to work smarter and be able to deliver on those promises that they're making to our end customers without having to completely just overwhelm ourselves with bodies and overhead and things like that. So that really was what was ultimately successful for us in our day-to-day workflow before the cloud.
Got it. Okay. And so when you took a look at all of the feedback that came in from your stakeholders and started looking at a couple of years ago, how do we plan this out? What were the type of things that you were looking for? How did you go through building that type of project and identifying how to fill those gaps?
So we were pretty honest with ourselves in that we knew what we didn't know. And so we understood that we were not cloud experts. We did not understand all of the benefits that it could bring. I think we suspected, we'd heard enough. We'd seen other people that went before us in the industry and learned both what not to do and what to do in that world. And we learned a lot of good lessons on that. But it pointed us firmly, I think, in a direction which was, it was time to do that for us. So we needed to modernize our distribution supply chain. So we first, again, we had discussions with stakeholders, right? What are the pain points? How do we understand what is giving us the biggest problems to be able to do this? What's the state of our library? That was something else we really needed to understand.
Sure.
I think we then learned enough where we said, okay, let's try this, let's test it. So we ran a POC, and with Atelier being a really vital part of that POC. And we learned a lot from that. We learned what the workflow needed to be for us. We understood how much work we were going to need to put in to prepare the assets, because there was a choice we had to make.
Yeah.
One choice is just put it all in the cloud and fix it there, or go through the pain up front and roll up your sleeves and fix it first and only put the good stuff, validated assets, into the cloud, which is what we ultimately decided to do. And that was a lesson we learned from others who had also gone before us.
And
so it really did flesh out our workflow of how this ingest was going to go for our cloud project. We were going to have to put in a certain amount of work to validate our assets and clean them up. Then what the ingest looked like, what we had to do to normalize those assets in the cloud, and then how we wanted them organized within the cloud. And that was a real differentiator, I think, between the options we had for cloud asset management systems.
That's you bring up a good point there. Not only just in cleaning up, title management before you get into it, implementing a supply chain is a huge part.
Yeah.
Can we speak to maybe the maturity of tools that have helped you do that?
Sure.
You guys, I know, use a vendor on the title management side that has helped with that, helped with the process.
Yeah.
So
we had a very traditional title management system. And when we were looking at how we were going to organize the assets that were going to be coming in, it really shone a spotlight on how important it was to organize that title hierarchy.
Yeah.
For features, you had features, and then you had versions, and then you had assets. For episodic, it's much more complicated. You have the series, you have the season, you have the versions, you have the assets.
Yeah.
And so as we were going to be receiving assets, we needed to make sure there was a clear place to put them. And so that then brought up a whole nother issue for us, which is we really needed to revamp our title management system, which we did. And so we chose a new partner for that. That is causing us to have a complete revamp and cleanup of our title master, which is really important because it allows us to give a unique title ID to every title. Right now we have more than one, which causes some confusion. Organize them in the right way. Clean out some of the things that have just accumulated over time because thinking has changed. And so we'll have a nice, clean asset management system. And what's great about the cloud, and particularly Atelier, is it's flexible enough where we can actually connect it, and it's already fully integrated with our title master.
Right.
And so through an event bridge, anytime a title is updated in our title master system, that automatically flows through to Atelier. Whereas before, that required a proactive process that somebody had to go in and clean that up. And so that just makes it 10 times easier. So everything is completely synced, and we don't have to worry about different versions perpetuating over time.
No, I think it's such a key point.
Yeah.
Even from projects that maybe we saw 3 years ago to projects like yours that we're doing right now, it's such a simpler implementation path where we've got, rather than trying to boil the ocean and solve everything in one piece, you guys chose a best-of-breed vendor for title management that caused you to rethink that part. You chose a best-of-breed supply chain vendor, and then you used your existing business fulfillment system with SAP and Salesforce. But what I love is that in between all of that is one common event bus that you guys are using to get everything to communicate well.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's also sets us up for the future, because there are things that we haven't conceived of yet, that once we have a system that works in that piece of the supply chain, we're going to start to think, God, it would be great if this could connect, and then if this could connect, and if we could run reporting like this, and we could start to really pull this together into a truly world-class and future-proof distribution and sales and through delivery supply chain. And that's really what we're after.
Yeah. I want to brag on you guys a little bit, because you did spend a long time planning this.
We did. Such apologies for that, but we did.
It was great. What I thought the results of that were, though, by the time we got to implementation, you guys had thought through that so well that once the connections were made between your sales systems and your title system and Ateliere, we were able to get everything running in weeks.
Yes,
there was no months, there was no year time frames. Nope. Weeks.
Yeah, that's right.
That was fantastic.
No, it also allowed buy-in in our own organization. By doing it the way that we did it, we included other departments, and so decisions were made much quicker on our side. And as you said, the technology is open and flexible enough where once we had those decisions made, and even for the decisions we hadn't made already at that time, we were positioned to make them quickly once they came up. And that's what the partnership was so great with you guys is you brought these things up and we go, oh God, you're right. Okay, it's this.
Yeah.
And so because of that, you're right. We were able to stand this up and ingest files within weeks. And in fact, it could have been quicker if we didn't slow it down because of things we needed to do internally, which was a lot of housekeeping.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You talked about having started from a place where you had a distributed catalog, and one of your success points was enabling the sales team to have a quicker fulfillment and make sure they had the information necessary to close those deals. So when you talked about moving away from a distributed catalog to a consolidated catalog, what does that really mean for Lionsgate? How far does that go?
So we have a very large catalog, 17,000 title library. It's a pretty recent era, a lot of acquisition in that. And so our library is very disparate. And our knowledge about the state of that library is kind of all over the map. So it was critical if we wanted to really set ourselves up for a much more automated and streamlined supply chain, we needed to have much better visibility and confidence in our library. The only way to do that is to consolidate it and clean it up.
Yeah.
And so we worked in a very traditional way and still do today, where we work with service providers, multiple service providers. We make the decisions about where we work based on who has our stuff. And listen, we've done some very sophisticated deals and arrangements with those providers who have served us incredibly well in that model.
Yeah.
But there are problems that you can't solve even in that world. Having better control over your own assets was something Lionsgate really craved. We relegated all of the control over our assets to our service providers. We did a great job, but you know what? That's kind of our responsibility.
Sure.
So we wanted to have that. We wanted to have better flexibility. So in peaks in distribution activity, we had the ability to onboard more service providers. That was too hard in a world where you are consolidated and in few service providers.
Yeah.
So the importance for us was, number one, to understand our library better. And in doing so, which we've been doing for the past year and we'll be doing for probably another 18 months, is we're finding things that probably nobody knew we had. For instance, a foreign language version of something. Sales didn't know we had that, which means they couldn't sell it.
Yep.
So to me, that's sales enablement. I can go to the sales team and say, hey, you know what? We have a Spanish version of this, or we have a French version of this, or we have an Italian version of this. Go sell it. And then as we get even more sophisticated, we'll be able to say, and we can run reports to say, show me all the titles we have Italian free TV rights to that are ready to go right now, and we can service for less than $200, right? That's sales enablement to me. And so if we don't consolidate our inventory, have greater control over that, and have a much more streamlined distribution supply chain, there's no way I think we can really take advantage of that.
Yeah. What I think is great about that story, though, is while you're consolidating the catalog, you're really not precluding working with your service providers. You guys want to keep those relationships going.
Yeah.
So how does that work as you've got a consolidated catalog and you've got these service provider relationships?
So Lionsgate is not going to build a ton of infrastructure and take this stuff on. So service providers remain and will continue to remain an important part of our ecosystem. What's interesting about what we're doing, which is organizing our library, putting it in the cloud, and having it organized through a cloud asset management system like Atelier, this actually not only gives us the flexibility that we want, but also allows us to work with our service providers much more efficiently. So they can actually start to feed off of our assets that are nice and clean, which I think at the end of the day will end up being much cleaner and organized than what they have for us today, because we're cleaning all of that up. So their ability to bring the services to the assets, which feeds the Movie Labs 2030 vision, is really one of the core tenets for us, to be able to transact completely in the cloud as much as possible. And so we're doing our part by putting that in there, and that's going to be a requirement for our service providers in the future, which I'm confident they're moving towards if they haven't already gone there already. So yeah, they continue to be an important part of the supply chain for us and will continue to be.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
When you picked a couple of new vendors as you built this out, I know you worked with a consultancy practice and being an important part of how to build this out and to have the resources necessary to build this. Can you kind of talk through some of the qualification criteria that you looked for, both in partners and consultants, and what was important to Lionsgate in that process?
So again, Lionsgate makes a choice. Our model is not to have a lot of technical infrastructure. I mean, we have enough to do what we need to do, but we rely on our partners to do that. And that's where that line, I think, between vendor and partner starts to become much more stark.
Sure.
We were really looking for partners that were open-minded enough to be able to take some of that on for us, who were actually, you talk about no code versus code, we were looking for no code, right? We didn't want to build a lot. And so some of the other service providers that were out there that we definitely looked at, they give you tools, sophisticated tools that will allow you to build an infrastructure for yourselves that would be terrific.
Yep.
And if you had that kind of infrastructure or had the desire to build that infrastructure, those are completely valid options for you. We weren't looking for that. We were hoping we could find somebody that was willing to take this journey with us and develop for us as we go. And let us take advantage of development that they may be doing for other customers also. And that's what we were able to find with Atelier, really, was the ability for us to be able to take the ride with you and to give you feedback. And the tool was flexible enough where we bring something up and they go, oh, okay, well, this is how we'll handle that. Or let us write something and we'll release that in the next code. And I think by doing that, the tool just gets stronger and stronger for other people along the way, the other existing customers and future customers, because these are real world issues that I don't think are uncommon to Lionsgate.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely appreciate the partnership with Lionsgate. It's been a fantastic journey so far. Looking forward to a lot of additional time with you guys.
More to come.
And thanks a lot for stopping by here at NAB.
My pleasure. Happy to do it. Thanks.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you. Live from NAB, this was Eric Carson with Craig Ainsworth from Lionsgate.